There was a moment, I do not know exactly how old I was, when someone in my family decided I was ready for a games console. I do not even remember which one it was. That sounds like a bad start to a nostalgia video. But stay with me, because that detail is not the point. The point is what happened after, the hours, the music that stayed in your head when you went to bed, the games that made you feel things you could not explain yet because you were probably 7, and you had no words for it, only the controller in your hands. This video is about the games I remember, the ones that made me fall in love with all this. Adventure Island, or HUDSON'S Adventure Island, as it is officially called, came out in Japan in 1986. It was made by Hudson Soft, and it is actually a port of an older arcade game called Wonder Boy. Except Hudson could not use the Wonder Boy name or characters because Sega owned those. So they replaced the main character with a real person, the actual spokesperson of Hudson Soft, a man named Toshiyuki Nakahashi, famous in Japan for being able to press a button 16 times per second. That is a strange origin story for a game, but it became one of the best-selling Famicom games in 1986, moving over 1,000,000 copies. Now, the game is actually hard. The last levels in particular were, let me be polite, not designed with kindness in mind. You played as a guy on a skateboard, running through tropical levels, and there was a hunger meter that went down constantly. So you could never stop. You had to keep moving. The game punishes you for stopping, and there was no save function. None. You could not save your progress. Every time you turned the console off, you went back to the beginning. I hate to admit this, but I had a whole ritual. I would warm up, genuinely warm up. I would play the early levels a few times to get my hands back in shape before trying to push further, because I had lost my rhythm once and I paid for it, and I was not doing that again. I never knew how far I got compared to other kids. There was no internet to check. You just played until you could not, and then you tried again tomorrow. A lot of people think all NES games were platformers. They were not. Road Fighter came from Konami, released in arcades in 1984, which makes it one of Konami's earliest games. Actually, it was their very first racing game. The Famicom version came out in Japan in 1985. You drove a red car, I believe based on a Chevrolet Corvette, and you had to reach the end of each stage without running out of fuel or crashing. The fuel mechanic meant you had to hit specific colored cars on the road to refuel, which sounds simple, but when you're going at maximum speed, which is around 400 kilometers per hour in the game, hitting the right car without also hitting the wrong one is not simple at all. But what I remember most, the thing that is burned into my memory, is the Konami man. If you drove well enough, stayed on the road, did not crash for a certain stretch, this figure would fly past the side of the screen. He looked, to my childhood brain, like Superman. Just this shape flying past your car on a TV with a cathode ray tube, which already had this soft glow to everything. And there he was. It turned out it was just the Konami mascot character making a cameo appearance, worth 1000 bonus points in the NES version. But I did not know that then. I just knew something extraordinary had appeared on screen, and I had caused it by being good. Super Contra was released in arcades in January '88, a sequel to the original Contra. The original Contra already had a reputation. It was a run-and-gun game, meaning you run, you shot things, many things tried to kill you. Super Contra kept all that and then added something new. The levels switched perspective. Some were the side-scrolling shooting you expected, but others were top-down. You looked down at your character from above and had to navigate a different kind of chaos. To me, as a kid, it was extraordinary. Two different games in one. One moment you are shooting sideways through a jungle, and the next you are looking down at some alien compound, trying not to die from every direction. For the era, that kind of variety inside a single game was genuinely surprising. I should be honest though, not everyone agrees the top-down section were a good idea. I disagree, but I understand the argument. The side-scrolling levels are tighter. The top-down levels are messier. You could argue they interrupt the rhythm. What I remember is not the rhythm. I remember the feeling of the game being bigger than I expected. And that feeling is worth a lot. I want to say something about track and field that might sound strange. I think it made some kids actually like sports. Not because the game was realistic, but it had breadth. It was not one sport, it was the Olympics, compressed. Running, jumping, throwing, all of it. My personal favorite was the long jump. Something about timing the jump just right, hitting the angle, watching the little figure sail through the air. There was a version of satisfaction there that I have not found in many games since. Do you remember Circus, Charlie? You played as a circus performer, standing on a lion, jumping through rings of fire. You're literally on a lion. The lion is walking forward and you have to jump through fire. I did not question this as a child. The lion, the fire, the clown suit, it all made perfect sense in the context of the screen. It was only later, as an adult who thinks about game design, that I started to appreciate just how absurd the pitch would have sounded in a meeting. Yeah, okay, a clown on a lion, fire, and yet it worked. It was genuinely fun. The levels changed. There were trapeze acts, there were horses, there were tightropes. Each one a new way to make you feel like you were part of something spectacular. This game's music lived in my head. Bomberman has a strange origin. The very first version was actually written in 1980 as a tech demo for HUDSON'S basic compiler. It was not even supposed to be a real game, it was a test. The version that became famous, the NES version, came out in Japan in 1985. You placed bombs in a grid maze and used the explosions to destroy walls and enemies. And the space between placing the bomb and the moment it exploded was filled with more tension than most games produce with hours of cutscenes. You could blow yourself up. That was always possible. Every bomb you placed was also a risk to yourself. This one changed something. Everything up to Duck Hunt required a controller, a joystick, a D-pad, buttons. Duck Hunt required a gun, an actual plastic gun you pointed at the television. The NES Zapper was released in North America in October 1985 alongside the console itself. It worked by detecting light from the screen, not by firing anything. When you pulled the trigger, the console would flash a white block around the target for a fraction of a second, and the Zapper's sensor would detect whether the gun was aimed at the light. That is a beautiful piece of engineering for 1984. Actually elegant. The game itself, well, you shot ducks, that was it. A dog would go into the bushes, the ducks would fly up, you had 3 shots per round to get them. If you missed, the dog laughed at you. I do not know who decided the dog should laugh, but I want them to know that their decision has lived in the memories of millions of children as a specific, personal humiliation. No other game character has done that to me. If I had to pick the game I spent the most pure hours on as a child, it might be this one, tied with Super Mario, which we will get to. Lode Runner was a puzzle platformer. You played a character who had to collect gold scattered across each level while avoiding guards. You could not fight the guards, you could only dig holes in the floor to trap them temporarily. Every level was its own puzzle, and there were, by the NES version, over 100 of them. I actually can't remember if I ever finished it. What I liked was that it never felt the same. The guards had their own movement patterns. Your path through a level could vary. You could dig a trap in the wrong place and block your own route and had to start over. Strategy and unexpected consequences together in every session. There is nothing I can tell you about Super Mario Bros. That you do not already know. And also, somehow, that is the most interesting thing about it. The game came out in Japan in 1985. It sold more than 40 million copies on the NES. For many years, it was the best-selling video game of all time. A title it held until Wii Sports passed it in 2009 by virtue of being bundled with every console sold. And the music. Someone please just think about the music for a second. The Overworld theme was composed by Koji Kondo. It is 4 minutes long in its original form. It is 40 years old. And I promise you, if I play it right now, something happens to your body. A warmth, a memory, something physical. I do not know how a sequence of notes played through a chip in 1985 does that to a human brain, but it does. I have never met a person who dislikes this game. I mean, that is literally the truth. Every person I have ever spoken to who played it as a child has some version of the same face when it comes up. Something soft happens. So basically, Karateka was released in December 1984 for the Apple II. I didn't play it in Apple II, I played it in some kind of game console. It was created by Jordan Mechner, who was a student at Yale University at the time. He was 17 when he started it and about 19 when he finished. He spent approximately 2,000 hours on it over 2 years. It went on to hit #1 on the Billboard software chart. You played a martial artist trying to rescue a princess from a warlord named Akuma. The game is played on a single horizontal screen that scrolls as you walk forward. What made it different was the animation. Mechner used rotoscoping. He filmed his own karate instructor performing real movements, then hand drew over the footage frame by frame to create the character's motion. The result moved unlike any other game of the era, fluid, almost physical. The game also had a secret. If you turned the floppy disk over and inserted it upside down, there was a complete second version of the game, played with everything flipped vertically. A hidden Easter egg built into the physical object. Mechner included it as a joke, anticipating confused players would call tech support and be told to insert the disc correctly. A kid built this, alone, in a dorm room, between classes. When you hit maximum upgrade level in this game, when you had the fastest tank with the most powerful shots, there was a very specific feeling, something close to invincibility, but fragile. You still had to protect that base. The power-up did not remove the pressure, it just made you feel capable of handling it. I remember that maximum upgrade state clearly. The speed of the movement, the bigger explosions, the way enemies suddenly felt manageable instead of overwhelming. Games that can create that shift from fear to confidence without removing the challenge. Those are games that understand something. Street Fighter was released by Capcom in arcades in 1987. It was Capcom's first competitive fighting game. The first version of the cabinet had large rubber pads instead of buttons. The harder you hit the pads, the harder your character hit on screen. The pads kept breaking. They eventually replaced them with normal 6-button layout, which became the standard for the entire genre. The game was a commercial success, but it was not a phenomenon. That came with Street Fighter II, which you are probably seeing right now on the screen, which changed everything in arcades. Street Fighter II is the game most people mean when they say Street Fighter. But the original Street Fighter still mattered. It introduced the Hadouken and the Shoryuken. It introduced Ryu and Ken. It established the concept of a worldwide martial arts tournament as the structure for a one-on-one fighting game. Without the first game, the second game does not exist. And yes, tournaments still happen. Competitive communities still exist, still hold events, still play these games seriously. That started from two guys who decided to make a martial arts game where you could input secret commands to perform special moves. in 1987. With pads you had to punch. What a chain of events. If you grew up with any of these, I would like to know which one stayed with you. Leave it in the comments. And like always, thanks for watching.